Once upon a time, isn't that the way all fairy tales begin? Once upon a time, little kids had to convince their predecessors that skiing is great fun. Father and Mother didn't know as yet. Not only was it great fun, it was very hard, and some people were even ashamed to do it. There is a wonderful story about a local parish priest who had his skis sent by post and then practiced around midnight in his garden so as not to be seen by his parishioners. That's not him. Nor is that. That's Granny's dog. Aren't they lovely? But it was not only sitting around, it was hard work, sometimes on top of the roof, and even the ladies had to stem in sometimes, you see. The ski instructor didn't work himself to death in those days and was rightly proud of his medals. Could you imagine having this amount of snow in your back garden? No, thank you. But over here it's quite normal, and in 1901 a high-spirited group of skiers founded the now world-famous Arlberg Skiing Club in this so-called Hospiz in St. Christoph on the Arlberg Pass. These pictures, taken in the mid-30s, demonstrate how tedious skiing was, having no cable cars, no chairlifts, no nothing. You had to walk the whole way by yourself. It took 2 hours to get up there and 3 minutes to come down. And then you were ready for a beer or whatever. It was a hard day's work. In fact, you could even say it was a hard day's night, a genuine case of early to bed, early to rise. There was no local hop in the afternoon because they were all tired out. It was up at the crack of dawn, and what looks like a polar expedition was normal practice some 50 years ago. I wonder where the others are. Up there, by the way, you can probably see the Flexen Pass, literally carved into the rock and taking you to Zürs and Lech, weather permitting, of course, not to mention the avalanches. This is the train of the Arlberg line, opened by the Emperor himself in 1884. We are passing through Klösterli on our way to Langen, and here she comes, thundering into Grand Central Station. All the taxis are waiting for clients, 1 horsepower apiece. The porters are waiting for work or a good dentist. After luggage and guests have been packed into local transport, they start off on a breathtaking sleigh ride. After 45 minutes, they reach the tiny village of Stuben, where hundreds of years ago the Crusaders found shelter on their way to the Holy Land before climbing the Arlberg Pass, without knowing very much about skiing, of course. Hannes Schneider was born in Stuben, who is supposed to be the inventor of the famous Arlberg style, the modern technique of downhill skiing. He also taught skiing in Japan and in the United States as well. This curious vehicle, incidentally, a sort of semi-caterpillar, was originally designed for the Sahara, but obviously didn't quite seem to get there. Amazing the amount of female skiers who had also cottoned onto it, even with their kids. And now we've got trouble. Path closed, no way up. Nevertheless, even in the mid-30s, it wasn't as bad as in the old days because they already had a very effective snow blower working, as you can see here. It's the latest model, and of course, it took some time to clear the road. Usually speaking, the journey from Langen Grand Central to Zürs took about 2 hours and to Lech about 2.5 hours, as long as there were no complications. And if there were, you couldn't get heavy machinery up here, so everybody had to dig into it and do it by hand the old-fashioned way. And if that didn't work, you could still dig a tunnel through it, and funnily enough, the horses didn't seem to mind either. The journey along the Flexen route was a risky business. You could never be sure what was around the corner on this road. And if you should go up there tomorrow, you will possibly notice that there has been a slight improvement. The original construction began in 1895, and the road was literally cut and blasted into the rock, and it was amazing to see how man was able to overcome nature, and equally amazing to see how nature was able to fight back with snowstorms, avalanches, and so on. Of course, as you can imagine, the construction costs were horrendous, and the government required the 3 communities of Lech, Wart and Klösterle to collectively contribute 10% of the total building costs, which they could hardly afford to do, and if they hadn't somehow managed it, there probably wouldn't be any skiing in Lech and Zürs, believe it or not. I wonder if it's gone through anybody's mind who took all these unique pictures. Well, it was a man named Bürkle from Bludenz at the foot of the Arlberg Pass, and he in fact wasn't a cameraman at all, he was a mountain guide. The original construction took 5 years, by the way, and for the first time in history there was a relatively safe connection between Lech and Zürs and the Arlberg route. And even after completion it was quite a battle to get where you wanted to go, by sleigh, by foot or on ski. Who could afford a car? Hurry up, or you'll be late for dinner. You too, sir. Have you ever seen a horse stand still in its tracks to warn you there is an avalanche on its way? Stay tuned. There you are, that's Noddy. And now we are approaching Zürs, which at one time was completely deserted in winter before the skiers took over. The first showed up 100 years ago. In the meantime, Zürs is deserted in summer because the former cattle breeders became skiing instructors. The first skiing lessons for the local people were held in the then tiny Zürs in 1906, and Hannes Schneider from Stuben, who later became one of the most brilliant skiing instructors of all time, was one of the students. Could this be one of his students after just 2 weeks of practice? Now, this was the first operational ski lift in the Arlberg region, possibly the first in Austria at all. Zürs in 1936. By today's standards, we would call it a baby lift at best. It wasn't very long, not even very comfortable, as you can see. But from now on it was a lot easier to get to the top, and skiers could concentrate more on their descent. There weren't masses of cars up here, but there were always masses of snow. Wheel drive, must dig. And now we are approaching Lech, of course. The old church built some 6 centuries ago. The first group of skiers showed up here in 1922. At that time, the village had about 300 inhabitants. Some of whom even dared to skate on the frozen part of the river. Do you recognize this? You might have crossed it today, the old bridge. The original corner hotel in the background, the Lech White House, the former county court. And this sort of thing hasn't changed very much either. The old post hotel. Something slightly wrong here, I think. Believe it or not, when the Lech skiing school started in 1925, it had just 2 instructors compared with more than 200 today. The Schlegelkopf lift became operational in 1939, and until that point instructors and students had to walk to the top, which was quite exhausting, but even the little ones had no complaints. And there he is again. And again. And here comes the rear guard. And now it's time for lesson 1 of Group 4B. And as you will be able to see in the next couple of minutes, skiing techniques have advanced somewhat in recent years. Even the outfit was different, and you had to wear great baggy trousers, otherwise you couldn't have turned around owing to the fact that the skis were extremely long, over 7 feet normally speaking. And this really is Lech in the background. It has changed a bit too. That could be Group 5A. But we should turn to looking at the more advanced skiing specialists now. And that's it for today, and look at the length of those skis. If you try to do any of that stuff tomorrow on Schlegelkopf, you'll be in trouble because they dismantled the ski jump years ago. But still going strong is cross-country skiing. In those days they used a different route from Post Hotel down the river Lech to Stubenbach and then back again. In the closing scenes, we want to show you the most astonishing pictures taken about 50 years ago. Whilst powerful snowplows and blowers were already engaged in keeping the passes and main roads open, the farmers in the remote villages of the area were still forced to employ the old-fashioned methods. Their so-called heavy machinery was livestock. Horses, if available, and cattle had to force their way through deep snow, trampling it down, and thus enabling local farmers to find their way. It took hours, and if it started snowing again, they had to start again. Could you imagine it? It's a lot easier today, isn't it?